Welcome in. BeachBoogieandBlues.com. I'm Justin Rouse, and I'll be here with you until 4 o'clock. And that was Russell Thompkins Jr. and the new Stylistics, and Bet You By Golly Wow. That was live from 2005 from North Myrtle Beach. Got a huge show for you today. The one, the only, the great Russell Thompkins Jr. will be coming on the show.
Our next guests are a legendary soul group, their new CD, The Very Best of the Stylistics, and more. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Russell Thompkins Jr. and the new Stylistics. Kids, take it away.
I'm going to have to ask him how in the world he does that. I couldn't sound like that if I tried. I don't know if I sold my soul, I would ever be able to sound like that. Russell Thompkins Jr. and the new Stylistics, You Are Everything, live on the David Letterman show. And we're definitely going to ask him about that, along with a lot of other questions. Make sure you do not miss that.
It's time for On the Boardwalk's Artist Showcase, getting the answers straight from the beach music superstars.
All right, guys, the showcase this week, as we have been talking about this whole show, the one, the only Mr. Russell Thompkins Jr. Russell, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Very good. And yourself?
Doing well. This is Russell Thompkins Jr. from the new Stylistics, and the Stylistics from back in the 70s. I'm talking 4 decades of great music, rhythm, blues, soul, Carolina beach music, any kind of music you can think of, man. It's such an honor to be talking with you right now.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, let's go ahead and get started. I got a few questions I want to ask you. I've kind of been getting prepared for this, and also some questions I pulled from my listeners. So let's first of all talk about, your beginning in the music industry has been well documented, and there's, websites out there describing your early beginnings, so we don't need to talk about that. But I would like to talk about how, like I said, 4 decades of music. Did you still think you'd still be recording today and having music out on the radio?
Well, I had no idea that I would even be alive. No, in the music business, everything is speculative. So, recording and making music, you never know if you're making a hit record or if the record that you're making at this time will be around for a long time. It always fascinated me how these records we made in 1969, 1970 are still around right now. And I really attribute it to the great writers and producers and arrangers that I had at that time.
Yeah, you and Tom Bell kind of got together, especially there in the beginning, and did a lot of stuff together. If you had to choose your favorite recording that you and him worked on, which would that be?
That would be hard because it wasn't like one recording session. I mean, one song. It was a long recording session. We would work on some songs, like 4 or 5 songs. We go in the studio, and we'd knock off about 3 in a day. Then we go in again. I'd go back out on the road, and then I'd come back and go in again and do about 3 or 4 more songs. And at the time, there were songs that I enjoyed, all the songs that him and Linda wrote, but nothing really jumped out at me as much as Bet You By Golly Wow did. That session right there and that song has lasted with me since the beginning.
Yeah, and speaking of the beginning, who were some of your musical influences before you got into with the Stylistics back in the day? Growing up in Philadelphia.
Well, my father was a singer, so when I was a kid, before 10 years old and earlier, my mother said she knew I would be a singer from the time I was about 5 years old or so. But my father would sing all the time, and he would play records, from the people from back in that time. And I would listen to, as growing up, I would listen to people like Billy Eckstine, Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald, and people of that genre during that time. But once I was about 10 years old or a little older, Motown came in. Motown changed my life completely. So I would listen to the Temptations, the Four Tops, and I'd listen to all the people in Motown, Smokey Robinson, everyone. That made a great influence on me thinking about being in the music business. But the music of my heart, that I would listen to when I was a teenager and going through puberty and being mad at my parents and wanting to be off by myself.
Being a rebel.
Yeah. I listened to a lot of Dionne Warwick, and I listened to Frank Sinatra.
Oh, wow, okay.
And I still do.
Awesome. You mentioned, Motown Hitsville, USA, and when you watch live clips of the Stylistics and even today with the new Stylistics, you guys did a lot of that dancing. Did y'all ever think about taking it over to old Hitsville, USA?
Not really. We never thought about, in the beginning with the Stylistics, we didn't think about ourselves as being recording artists. We were a working band. We started out, my last year in high school, 1968, is when the Stylistics got together. And our parents were friends of club owners here in Philadelphia. So we got a chance to play at nightclubs in Philadelphia my last year in high school. And I got a chance to do cabarets and dances and things like that. And so we established ourselves in the beginning as a working act. Recording came secondary.
That's awesome.
We did, on our first recording, You're a Big Girl Now, we just went in the studio, recorded it, and forgot about it. Went back out, went to work, kept on singing, went on the road, and we did a gig in 69 in Newport, Rhode Island. And my wife and a lot of different other people at the time, my girlfriend, they all came up to see us in Newport, Rhode Island from Philadelphia and said, y'all know y'all got a hit record in Philadelphia? We didn't know anything. Well, by the time we got back home to Philly, we found out that our record was being played every day. And right away, we started going back to work again. It was just more jobs. Every time we got a hit record, it was more jobs, more jobs. So we always established ourselves as a working band more so than recording artists.
So you would, it sounds like you would hit the road to get that recognition out there, but then back home you were already becoming a star.
Yes.
Okay.
Here in Philadelphia, it became, well, we were like becoming local legends anyhow from doing the cabaret shows and the working at the clubs in Philly. And we had the Battle of the Bands. There was a lot of bands in Philadelphia at the time, so the DJs here would put together a show at a place called the Uptown Theater. And Uptown was like the Apollo in New York. And they would have shows with the Battle of the Bands, and we would always be on them shows.
That's awesome. Well, how did you get, and we're jumping ahead a little bit to 1975, December of 1975. You were one of the first groups to perform on Saturday Night Live. How did y'all end up becoming a part of that bill with Candace Bergen? She was the host back then, and who booked the show to go on Saturday Night Live?
Well, at that time, the original group, there's two members of the original group still working under the name Stylistic also. And their manager is by the name of Jack Bart. He's from out of Universal Attractions in New York City. Jack Bart's father was James Brown's manager. You would probably see him in the new James Brown movie. His name was Ben Bart.
Okay.
And because of that, Jack became the manager of the Stylistics, our third manager. And he was based out of New York. And his agency is one of the biggest agencies in New York City. And they booked us on Saturday Night Live.
Oh, okay. All right. Did you get a chance to meet any of the cast members?
We met everybody. We were there all
awesome.
day. It was so great being there, meeting everyone. And Martha Reeves was on that show also.
Oh, I did not realize that. Okay.
Yeah. And I met Martha Reeves there and met all the guys, hung out with and talked with Garrett Morris for a long time. And
I liked him.
And what's the news guy? The guy that he has a show on cable now.
Well, if it's back in 75, the news guy, the one that I can always remember back then might would have been Chevy Chase, I would think.
No, that's I met him too.
Oh, cool.
But,
okay.
But I met someone that didn't have anything to do with Saturday Night Live while I was at the studio that day.
Oh.
I went off by myself, and I saw this room in Rockefeller Center that had all of these TVs in it. I said, let me go in here and sit down. And I went and sat in the corner, and it was totally dark in this room. And I looked up, and I'm watching TV shows from all over the world, from every place, news shows, sports shows, everything. And it was dark in there, and somebody said, it's really fascinating, ain't it? And I looked over, and I didn't know who it was. And as I was getting ready to go out, the light came on. It was, I think his name is Brian Gumble.
Oh, wow. Brian Gumble, yeah.
And I got a chance to meet him. That was something
awesome.
that lasted in my mind for a long time. Every time I see him on the the sports program on cable.
You're thinking, I sat there and watched just a bunch of TVs with that guy one time.
Yeah.
Well, we'll jump ahead even further now. 2006, you performed, and this is with the new Stylistics, you performed on the David Letterman show. You know, his wife, and I did some homework on this, David Letterman and his wife's favorite all-time song is You Are Everything. And that, in common with me, that's my favorite Stylistic song. And what was the experience like being on David Letterman?
Well, at this time in my career, I never in my life thought I would do nighttime television. You watch nighttime television all your life. You see every kind of act. You see everything that's from before David Letterman, before Jay Leno, before all of them guys, Johnny Carson. You watch everything on there, and you never think you would be on anything like that. And when we got the chance to go on there, that was like I would put at the top of the list in my highlights of in my career.
I actually played that clip from earlier. You guys did an awesome job with that on that actual show, and you know I've always been a Letterman fan. It's kind of crazy he's going to be retiring this year.
Yes, it is. It was really good. And he went all out on it too. He had he brought in my band, and my band mixed with his band, the studio band with Paul Schaefer, and he had a string section there. I mean, the orchestra was really, really nice.
Yeah, you take an orchestra everywhere you go. It's a little bit off topic, I'm sorry, but you take an orchestra whenever you have a live show, correct?
No, I take a band with me everywhere I go, but never an orchestra that much, you know, using strings and everything like that. I usually have a keyboard player to do all of that.
Well, I did notice in the middle of that clip that you did say, you know, give it up for the guys in the orchestra. You know, I like that you did that.
Oh, always. That's the heart and soul of everything.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, also, let's talk about, you've had 12 consecutive top 10 hits in the 70s, and you had one that became Grammy nominated. That was You Make Me Feel Brand New. You know, to get in that Grammy nomination, did that change the group at all? Or, you know, what was it like to be nominated for a Grammy?
It didn't really change anything as far as the group is concerned. That record that we made that was nominated made the group more popular, which was You Make Me Feel Brand New. It became a hit all over the world. But at the time when the Grammys was going on, I was on the road somewhere. I don't know. I might have been some other place in the world. But I knew we weren't going to win that. I just knew it.
Why is that?
It was up against Gladys Knight, Midnight Train in Georgia, and I think it was a Roberta Flack. Either Killing Me Softly or one of them songs that Roberta Flack had. And them records were monstrous. They were monstrous records. So I'm like, Grammys, yeah, that's cool. Where's my next gig?
You were ready to go back out there and just keep on working, man.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. Also, you have, in 2007, you performed at the Clive Davis Grammy party, and you teamed up with Alicia Keys. And, you know, for a lot of the listeners out there, all ages, they know Alicia Keys as well. So what was it like performing with her in front of Clive Davis?
That was fascinating. I had met Clive Davis before. That afternoon when I got there, I talked to Clive Davis for a while. He called me over, and he said, come here, Russ. And he had a cell phone in his hand, and he dialed the phone, and he said, I got somebody here who want to talk to you. So he gave me the phone, and it was Michael Jackson. And I talked to Michael Jackson for a while, and then one of my all-time greats, I've been a fan of his since I was a little boy, before I even thought about music or singing or whatever, was Johnny Mathis was on the show. So I got a chance to talk and watch Johnny Mathis work. And that was fascinating. That night at the show, it was before I went on. Johnny Mathis was on stage doing his part of the show. But all of the young guys were standing on the side. Jamie Foxx, P. Diddy, Ruben Stoddard, and all of these new young singers were standing over there looking at Johnny Mathis like, who is this guy? You know, what is he doing? And I'm thinking to myself, looking at them, if you guys only knew that if it wasn't for him, none of y'all would even be here.
Exactly. Exactly. You should have went over there and told him that. Well, you know, I actually had a listener who just messaged me a question on my Facebook page, and they want to know how much rehearsal went into Saturday Night Live and David Letterman and the Clive Davis Grammy party. Did you have to rehearse for all those, or was it just, you know, bam, you know, here you go, play?
Oh, yeah, you always have to have a sound check and a rehearsal. On the Alicia Keys shows, we rehearsed that afternoon, and she's an excellent musician. Excellent musician. If anyone knows anything about electronic keyboards, if you play an electronic keyboard and someone is playing in a different key, you don't necessarily have to be that skilled of a musician to change, to be able to transpose right there on the spot. The keyboard itself, you can change the key and play it. But she had been rehearsing with someone before me, and when she sat down at the keyboard, she must have had changed the keys, and they started playing, and we started singing. It was out of key. It was too low or something. And she said, whoa, wait a minute, this don't sound right. She went back in, and she looked at the keyboard, she changed it, and we went, and we started doing it in the original key. And she was on top of it. That afternoon, she rehearsed with me, she rehearsed with Earth, Wind & Fire. She played with everyone. Then afterwards, she had a press conference, and she played the grand piano and sang by herself. Really, I gained a lot of respect, for her that afternoon watching her. But we had a lot of rehearsals that day. On the David Letterman show, we had great rehearsals there, too, with the orchestra. You always have to do it when you bring in an orchestra for them to understand and hear the context of how the music is supposed to be played. What I remember most about the rehearsals at David Letterman is in the Ed Sullivan Theater. He has it so cold in there that you have to wear a coat. It is freezing in that studio, and they say He likes it that way.
I've heard some quirky things about Letterman. I hear things have to be just right for Letterman, but I've also heard he's a great guy if you get a chance to meet him. And there's some reading I've done. Did you get a chance to talk to him a lot?
Yes, not a lot. I talked to him at the sound check and before we went on. Everyone there was nice.
Awesome.
Everyone extremely nice. Paul Schaefer and Lee, the bass player, they were really, really nice. I got a chance to work with them again. I went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and on one of their induction ceremonies, I did a couple of my songs there, and they played behind me.
Awesome. Well, we got to move right along here. We got time for a few more questions. One thing I wanted to get to is you just came off the Soul Train cruise, which had about 2,000 fans on board. I wish I was one of them. Who were some of the people that you played with on that cruise?
That was an awesome week. First of all, from out of Philadelphia, my band played behind them also was Harold Melvin's Blue Notes and Wilbur Hart's Delphonics. Frankie Beverly was also on the cruise. Gladys Knight was on the cruise. Billy Davis and Mary McCoo were on the cruise. Valerie Simpson from Ashford and Simpson was on the cruise. Who else was
basically just a star-studded cast.
Oh, it was a hell of a week.
I can imagine.
And some of the greatest fans in the world were on this cruise.
Do they get a chance to interact with for anybody that's interested, I think they do a Soul Train cruise every year. Do they get a chance to actually interact with you guys during that week?
We live with the people on the cruise.
That's awesome.
Because we're on the boat next door to them. Our cabins are all together. Then we have, it's not just a show. All during the time you're there, you're doing question and answering sessions, different interviews here and there, talking with people, different functions going on. And these people, man, the people that were there were people who grew up with me. They were people of my age and older, and to be able to sit on stage and have 500 people ask you questions is awesome.
I can only imagine. It's got to be humbling at the same time, but also, you got to just, I can't explain. I would love to go on one of those just to interact with all you stars that people don't get to do that a lot. And for whoever put on the Soul Train cruise, I commend them because that's just an awesome thing to put on. And you actually were on Soul Train in 73 and 74.
Oh, yes. Yes.
What was that like? And tell us a little bit about how Don Cornelius was.
Don Cornelius was really, really great. We were real young guys at that time, and they were very nice with us because we were nervous and we didn't know what to do. We traveled from Philadelphia to Los Angeles. I'm wrong. The first time I met Don Cornelius was we traveled from Philadelphia to Chicago, and Soul Train had just started as a local program in Chicago. And I got a chance to meet Don Cornelius, That same day, I met David Ruffin and the Stable Singers band. I had worked with them previously. They had turned themselves into their own group, and that group was called Brainstorm. We all were on that show. And that's when I first met Don Cornelius. Then the second time is when After Soul Train moved to Los Angeles. And it was really huge. Then it had become big on television. And we were traveling from Philadelphia to Los Angeles, and when we got there, our luggage were lost.
Oh, man.
We didn't know what we were going to wear, what everything was going on. So there was a comedian from out of Philadelphia by the name of Dap Sugar Willie. He was there, and he remembered us because we grew up in the same neighborhood. He took us around. We bought new clothes and everything, went and did the show, and it turned out very fantastic.
That's awesome. You know, it's funny you lost your luggage. You got to be sitting there thinking, man, this is one of the most important times coming up, and of course that would happen.
Well, over the years, I've found out that that's why they say that's showbiz.
Yeah, I guess so.
Something happens every time. At least one thing happens every time. And a friend of mine that is also a friend of yours, who I work with now, is a partner of mine named Chris Beeler.
Yes, sir.
Chris Beeler always tell me, he say, Russ, if it was easy, everybody be doing it.
So true. That's 100% truth about a lot of things.
Yeah.
And speaking of Chris Beeler, we're going to go ahead and move to that. First of all, before we get into what you're doing now, what do you think of the Carolina beach music scene?
He introduced me to it.
We're a tight-knit group down here.
Yeah, I didn't know too much about it. And he introduced me to the music. He took me to one of the festivals in Myrtle Beach. And I met all of these new fans, people that I know, were crazy about stylistic music. And I started to, go back and forth with him and sing at a couple of shows and do a couple of autograph sessions and things like that. Then we went and we recorded a show that is not out yet, but it's a live new stylistic show with a orchestra from Myrtle Beach.
I think I've seen clips of that, actually.
Yes.
Speaking of the New Stylistics, when did you form them, and who's still with you right now from the New Stylistics? Because from what I understand, you've formed the New Stylistics some years ago. I don't know if it's changed members or not, but
no, we still have the same members. We just lost one member because he's an old friend, and I grew up with him. His name is James Ranton. And he became ill, and he couldn't travel on the road anymore, so he only stayed with us for about the first 5 years of the New Stylistics, or maybe a little longer. But he's not missed on stage, but he still works with us, because he's the best dancer out of all of us, and he used to do choreography, and he still does. The New Stylistics were formed in '03. I was having a lot of trouble at the end of 1998, 99, some life problems, and it had been boiling over for, I would say, 20, 30 years of discomfort of working with the original group. And it just got to a point in 99 where I said, look, I can't take this anymore. I quit. And I stopped singing. I went back to school. I studied music. I went back to high school. And for 3 years I was doing that. But the original band that was with the Stylistics I'm a runner, so I would be out in the street running. And they drive past in the car, and they would do the Blues Brothers. When we gonna put the band back together?
Oh, yeah.
I said, man, I'm not interested in singing. I was having a great time. It was the first time in my life I had been singing, under pressure since I was 17 years old, and it was the first time in my life where I didn't have any pressure to perform.
Yeah. You probably got to spend a lot of time at home as well.
Oh, yes. It was the most I had ever spent at home, and I was really feeling great. I got my life back together. I got my physical health back together, and I was feeling great. And here these guys come around telling me, when we going to put the band back together?
Well, Russell, I'm up against it here, but I do want to ask you about 2 or 3 more questions. One,
okay.
You've had numerous record labels. I guess tell us how you became a part of Forevermore Records with Chris Beeler, and also tell us a little bit about what it took into making the new single, Whatever It Takes.
Whatever It Takes. Okay, well, let me go back before that.
Okay.
I was with Amherst Records, which was, well, first of all, I was at Afghan Embassy Records when we did the first 3 albums with the Stylistics, which the Stylistics didn't sing on. The first 3 albums of the Stylistics was just me singing.
Oh, wow.
And one other guy in the Stylistics just singing on 2 of the songs that were on them 3 albums.
I did not realize that.
Yes, so that was not really a stylistic project as it was advertised. But a record company by the name of Amherst Records bought the catalog from H&L Records, which was originally Afro Embassy Records. I had done about 4 or 5 albums with H&L, and then I left and I went with Mercury Records. Then from Mercury Records, I went to Philly International Records, The Sound of Philadelphia. Well, Chris Beeler, who I mentioned earlier, worked with Amherst, and he produced an album on us. That's when I first met Chris. But when I left working with the Stylistics in the early 2000s, Chris was calling me up. He kept calling and saying, Russ, I want to take you in the studio. And as I previously said, I wasn't interested in singing.
Yeah.
But he was very persistent. And he kept on calling. So I said, all right. He said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll buy you the recording equipment. You put it in your house. And just record a song for me. I mean, when you feel like singing at your own leisure. Well, that one song turned into about 17 songs.
and there we go.
and that was also a part of putting the new group together, too, because I ended up making my first solo album with Chris.
Well, that is awesome, and you know, we're about to get this new song on right here, Whatever It Takes. Also, Russell...
let me talk about that.
Okay, go ahead.
Whatever It Takes was not supposed to be released. Chris Beeler wanted me to do a demo for somebody, and I was singing Whatever It Takes. And it's not even in the voice that I usually sing, and I had no idea that it would end up being a single. Huh. But that was totally on Chris Beeler.
And it's a great song. If that's not the voice you usually sing, and we've heard the voice you usually sing in, you don't have any bad qualities in that voice, brother.
Thank you very much.
Well, do you have any shows coming to Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina? I got somebody down in Florida. Do you have anybody coming, listening? For my listeners, do you have any shows coming our way?
Well, I'm working on a show right now, and it's not definite, but I think it's going to happen on Mother's Day in Richmond.
Okay, Richmond, Virginia. That's not far from me either.
And in October, I'm in Charlottesville, Virginia.
Okay.
At the Arts Center.
Awesome. Well, I got Virginia listeners, and I might have to ride up there for one of those, man, because I want to see you perform so much. Hang on the line for me, and for everybody else, they get Whatever It Takes from Russell Thompkins Jr. Russell, it's been an honor and a privilege, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
What about that, guys? Mr. Russell Thompkins Jr. and the new Stylistics and their new single, Whatever It Takes. And what a pleasure that was. And thanks to Chris Beeler from Forevermore Records for setting that up for me. Okay, I got requests coming out of Aiden, let's see, Washington, Greenville, Blackjack. We'll get them on the third hour along with the Mac Jones Classic of the Week and Robbie's Lost Pavilion Classic. We ran over a bit, but I'm not telling, I was not telling Russell Thompkins Jr. to stop talking, man. That was amazing. I loved every minute of it.